The day started like any other at the courthouse busy hallways. People rushing around, lawyers holding stacks of papers, and officers trying to keep everything organized. But in one corner, away from all the noise, a quiet teen sat on a wooden bench, holding a worn-out notebook close to their chest. The notebook looked old and soft from being opened too many times. Its pages were full of small handwriting, notes, and scribbles that only the teen could understand. Most people walked past without noticing them, but a few did glance, mostly because the teen looked too young to be there alone. They had a calm face, eyes that observed everything, and a strange stillness in their posture. They didn't fidget. They didn't look scared. They just watched the courtroom doors like they were waiting for something very important. Inside the courtroom, things were already tense. The judge sitting on the wooden seat was someone everyone knew well. He had a reputation for being sharp, strict, and sometimes a little too proud. People said he liked to feel in control, and he didn't appreciate being questioned, especially by someone younger or inexperienced. Today was no different. He leaned back in his chair with a slightly bored expression, tapping his pen on the desk. A lawyer walked up to him and whispered, "The teen is here." Sitting outside, the judge scoffed lightly. The one everyone's been talking about. The one who wants to speak in this case. What is a child doing in a courtroom matter like this? The lawyer shrugged, unsure how to explain. They say the teen studied the entire case. Some even say the teen knows more details than the adults. The judge gave a dismissive chuckle. "I'm not here to entertain stories. If the teen tries to talk, I will handle it." With that, he waved his hand, signaling for the next hearing to begin. Outside. The teen took a deep breath and looked at the clock on the wall. The hearing was moments away. They stood up slowly, tightening their grip on the notebook. Before walking inside, they closed their eyes for a moment and thought about the reason they were there. Their parent, the person who had tried everything to defend themselves, but had been pushed around because they didn't have money, confidence, or strong legal support. The teen had watched their parent break down at home many times, whispering things like, "I don't know how to win this, and no one listens to me." The teen had often sat next to them, silently wanting to help. And one day, when things got too overwhelming, the teen reached for the old law books kept on a dusty shelf. One book led to another. One chapter led to sleepless nights. One case study led to hours of online hearings. That was how it all began. The teen didn't study for school exams half as seriously as they studied the law. They didn't do it because someone forced them. They did it because their parent needed someone to stand beside them, someone who understood the system better than their parent did. The teen learned slowly at first, stumbling through terms they had never heard. But the more they studied, the more everything started making sense. They wrote explanations in simple words. They drew diagrams. They made lists of mistakes people often made in court. It wasn't easy. There were nights the teen fell asleep on top of their notes, mornings when their eyes were too tired to read tiny letters, and moments when they almost gave up because the legal system felt too complicated. But every time doubt appeared, they remembered their parents' trembling voice and tired face, so they continued. And now, after months of learning, they were finally here. Not as a lawyer, not as a witness, just as someone who refused to let their parent be treated unfairly. When the courtroom doors finally opened, the officers looked at the teen suspiciously, as if unsure whether to let them in. But one officer recognized them from earlier visits and nodded. "You're here for the same case, right?" he asked. The teen nodded. You can go in, but don't speak unless they allow you. The teen nodded again, holding their notebook closer. Inside the courtroom, people turned to look at them as they walked in. Some smiled kindly, some looked confused, and some whispered things like, "Is this really the kid everyone is talking about? And what are they doing here alone?" The teen ignored all of it. They made their way to the seat next to their parent, who looked tired but relieved to see them. Their parent placed a hand on their shoulder and whispered, "You don't have to do this. It's too much for you." But the teen shook their head gently. "You're not alone anymore," they whispered back. The judge noticed their quiet exchange and frowned. He tapped his microphone. "Let's begin," he announced, his voice echoing through the room. The opposing lawyer stood up confidently, holding a folder filled with papers. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is straightforward. The evidence clearly shows." The teen listened carefully, flipping through their notebook, scanning notes, dates, statements they had memorized. Their eyes followed everything the lawyer said, analyzing each sentence, checking whether anything was exaggerated or twisted. Their parent kept stealing glances at them, amazed at how focused they were. Then, after several minutes, the lawyer finished speaking. The judge nodded and turned to the parent. "You may speak now," he said. The parent stood, nervous. Their voice shook as they said, "Your Honor, there's been a misunderstanding. I submitted all the required documents," but before they could continue, the judge raised his hand. "Please don't repeat what we already know," he said impatiently. "We reviewed your documents." The parent looked down, defeated. The teen felt something twist painfully inside their chest. They knew their parent was telling the truth. They had seen the emails, the submission receipts, the exact files that were ignored. Their parent sat down slowly, eyes filled with disappointment. The judge sighed loudly. "If there are no new arguments, we will move toward closing this matter." That was the moment something inside the teen shifted. They could not stay silent anymore, not when everything was about to go wrong again. They stood up suddenly. People gasped softly. Even their parent grabbed their arm, whispering, "Sit down, please." But the teen took one gentle step forward. "Your Honor," they said clearly. The judge froze, looked up, and stared at the teen with disbelief. "Excuse me, who gave you permission to speak?" The teen swallowed hard but didn't back down. "I need to show you something." The judge gave a half laugh. "Show me something? What could you possibly show me? You look barely old enough to understand what's happening here." A few people chuckled nervously, but the teen kept their ground. "I understand the case better than you think." The judge leaned back, amused. "Oh, really? And what makes you believe that?" The teen opened their notebook. Inside were handwritten notes, legal references, highlighted lines, small, sticky notes pointing to exact mistakes made in the proceedings. Their hands trembled slightly, but their voice didn't. "I studied everything," they said softly. "Every document, every statement, every detail, and something important was ignored." The judge raised an eyebrow, surprised by the confidence in the teen's voice. He leaned forward slightly. "Ignored? And what might that be?" The teen took a slow breath, as if gathering courage. A document was submitted. It was received. It was stamped, but it was never added to the final review. A sudden wave of silence rolled across the courtroom. The opposing lawyer frowned, flipping through his folder. "That's impossible," he muttered. "We never got such a document." The teen stepped forward again, still keeping their voice calm. You did. I saw the email myself. I helped my parent organize everything. The document was submitted on time. The judge's expression hardened. And you're saying this court overlooked an official submission? Yes, the teen answered, looking him directly in the eyes. Something about their steadiness unsettled everyone in the room. The judge, who had mocked them minutes ago, suddenly seemed unsure. He glanced at the clerk. Check the submission log. The clerk hurried out. The teen didn't sit. They stood quietly, holding their notebook, waiting not with fear, but with certainty. Their parent held their arm, torn between pride and worry, whispering, "What if they get upset? What if this makes things worse?" But the teen shook their head gently. We can't stay silent anymore. The courtroom remained tense, everyone waiting for the clerk to return. Whispers floated in the air. Some people admired the teen's bravery. Others thought it was foolish. But no one could deny the strength in their voice. After several long minutes, the clerk returned, holding a printed sheet. He handed it to the judge. The judge's eyes ran down the paper slowly, then stopped. His forehead tightened. His face slowly changed, first confusion, then concern, then embarrassment. He looked at the teen again, but this time there was no mockery, only seriousness. The teen stood silent, waiting for the truth to finally come out. Everything was about to change. The entire courtroom felt heavy with silence as the judge stared at the paper in front of him. No one dared to move. Even the air felt still. The teens stood quietly beside their parent, holding the worn-out notebook close to their chest, waiting for the judge's reaction. This was the moment everything depended on. One mistake in the system, one ignored document, this was what had brought them here. And now the truth was finally in front of the judge. But instead of speaking right away, the judge took off his glasses and pressed his fingers against his forehead. It was a small gesture, but it said everything. It showed he knew something had gone wrong. It showed he understood the teen wasn't making anything up. And most of all, it showed he had underestimated someone he shouldn't have. The opposing lawyer shifted uncomfortably. He cleared his throat, trying to hide his confusion. Your Honor, there must be some misunderstanding. I never received this document. The judge glared at him. Well, according to this log, it was sent. And it was received. The lawyer swallowed hard. He opened his folder and flipped through pages, but it was clear he wasn't finding anything. He had been confident earlier, sure that the case was already in his favor. But now his confidence was cracking. The judge turned his attention back to the teen. How did you know this document existed? The teen took a small breath before answering. I organize everything for my parent. We didn't have a lawyer, so I kept every email, every receipt, every message. I made sure nothing was missed. And you're saying, the judge continued slowly, that you saw the submission confirmation? The teen nodded. Yes, I printed it out the same day. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you have it with you? Without hesitation, the teen opened their notebook, flipped through the pages, and carefully pulled out a folded piece of paper. They stepped forward and handed it to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. The judge unfolded it. His expression tightened again. There it was. The exact proof. The time, the date, the confirmation number. A hush spread across the courtroom as everyone realized the truth. The document had been submitted correctly. It had simply been ignored. The judge closed the paper slowly. almost with regret. He looked at the teen, and the expression on his face was completely different from the one he had earlier. There was no amusement, no sarcasm, no irritation. For the first time, he looked respectful. The teen's parent watched with wide, unsure eyes. They slowly reached for their child's hand and squeezed it. The teen squeezed back, giving reassurance without saying a word. Finally, the judge cleared his throat and spoke in a calmer voice. "It seems a mistake has been made. A serious one." The opposing lawyer looked shocked. "Your Honor," the judge raised his hand, cutting him off. "The submission was valid and received. It should have been reviewed. That was not done. That is unacceptable." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Which means we must reassess this case properly." Whispers filled the room again, soft, quick, uncertain. The teens stood quietly, but their heart pounded with emotion. Not excitement, not pride, just relief. Maybe they had finally given their parent a fighting chance. The judge straightened in his seat. "Young person," he said, addressing the teen directly, "you seem to know this case well. Please continue. What else do you believe was overlooked?" The teen blinked, surprised. No judge ever invited a teenager to speak like that, especially not one known for being proud. But they didn't hesitate. They flipped through their notebook, finding another page filled with notes. "There were more things," the teen said gently. "The timeline was wrong. The dates didn't match. And some details in the landlord's statement were repeated in different ways. Like they weren't sure which version was true." The opposing lawyer stiffened, clearly uncomfortable. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." Again the judge raised his hand. "Let them speak," the teen continued. Their voice was steady, calm, and respectful. They pointed out each inconsistency clearly. They explained how the landlord changed the story several times. They showed small mistakes that no one else had noticed. They even pointed out a missing signature that weakened the entire argument against their parent. Everyone listened. Everyone, even the people who had come for other cases, were now focused on the teen's voice. It was rare to see someone so young speak with such clarity. They didn't show off. They didn't sound proud. They simply sounded honest, like someone who cared deeply. At one point, the parent whispered softly, "How did you learn all this?" The teen gave a tiny smile, one page at a time. By the time the teen finished explaining everything, the judge sat back slowly, his expression thoughtful. He wasn't looking at a child anymore. He was looking at someone with genuine capability. The opposing lawyer looked pale. His confidence had disappeared. The judge sighed and spoke carefully. "This changes the case completely. The evidence is different from what was presented, and the mistakes pointed out today are serious." He paused again, his eyes falling on the teen. "You have done something remarkable," he said quietly. "You have shown an understanding of legal details that many trained professionals do not show." Gasps filled the room. Even officers at the back exchanged surprised looks. The teen lowered their gaze, embarrassed by the praise. "I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted fairness." The judge nodded slowly. "And fairness is exactly what this courtroom should stand for." He tapped his pen against the desk, thinking. "We will reconduct the evaluation," he announced firmly. "All evidence will be rechecked. Both parties will have equal opportunity. I will not allow an unfair ruling." The teen's parent covered their mouth with their hand as tears filled their eyes. For the first time in months, they felt hope. Real hope. The judge then turned to the opposing lawyer. You will submit every file again. No shortcuts. No missing documents. The lawyer nodded, defeated. Yes, Your Honor, the judge continued. Since the previously ignored document holds relevant importance, this case will likely shift in favor of the defending party. The parent let out a soft gasp, and the teens squeezed their hand gently. But then something surprising happened. The judge took a deep look at the teen again. His voice softened in a way no one expected. Young person, he said, have you ever considered studying law? Because what you showed today is rare. The teen felt their eyes widen. They didn't know what to say. They had dreamed of becoming a lawyer, but no one had ever encouraged them before. They looked down shyly. I don't know, they whispered. Maybe one day. The judge smiled slightly. If today is any indication, you will be excellent. More whispers. More amazed looks. The judge tapped the desk again. Given the new facts, I will be rewriting my earlier position. This court rules. The courtroom held its breath in favor of the defendant. The parent released a shaky breath, tears spilling down their face. They hugged their child tightly, whispering, You did it. You really did it. But the teen hugged back even tighter. We did it together, they whispered. People in the courtroom smiled warmly. A few even clapped softly before the officers signaled for silence. The judge gathered his papers and prepared to leave, but he stopped at the door. He looked back at the teen one last time and said, Never underestimate your own voice. It has more power than you think. And then he left. The teens stood there, holding their notebook, feeling lighter than they had in months. Their parent hugged them again, unable to stop the tears. They both knew their lives had just changed. As they walked out of the courtroom, people stepped aside for them. Some even said things like, That was unbelievable, or You're going to do great things, or You saved the case. The teen didn't respond much. They simply smiled shyly and stayed close to their parent. They hadn't done it for applause. They hadn't done it to impress anyone. They had done it because someone they loved needed help. And now, standing under the bright sunlight outside the courthouse, the parent gently touched their child's cheek and whispered, You're going to become someone amazing one day. The teen opened their notebook once more, flipping through the pages filled with effort, late nights, and tiny victories. They closed it slowly, holding it close to their heart. They didn't know exactly what the future held, but one thing was clear. Their journey had just begun.